His idea of one Guyana is him using his one set of friends across the ministry with taxpayers' monies. Look at the broadcasts of the national concerts, only aired on NCN, NTN, MTV, TVG, HJTV, and E-Networks. All friends and family of the government. In the honorable member's world, there is no HBTV Channel 9, no LRTVS, no HGPTV, no CNS6, and no RBS. He directs where the government's money should go, only to his friends and family, and blacklists those who speak against the government. Honorable member can best be described as a well-dressed failure. He has no policy and surrounds himself with promoters and supports organizers using their hard work to make himself look good. It's really a shame. You see, Mr. Speaker, on that note, it is quite interesting that the government ministers seem so incapable of representing themselves that their chief whip ensured that they speak after their opposition shadows. In any normal parliament, Mr. Speaker, the government ministers would present their vision for the year and what they intend to do with the monies allocated to their ministries, and the opposition shadows would have a chance to respond. Not so in Guyana. If Guyanese take a look at the lineup of speakers, it is clear that the government ministers do not want to speak before their counterparts on our side. Mr. Speaker, I find myself trying to understand the minds of those who believe that the Guyanese people would be happy with the budget that is before us. After reading this budget presentation, Mr. Speaker, there is no way that I can accept this as good enough for the Guyanese people who are currently facing economic and social hardships. Mr. Speaker, the PPP has presented 3 budgets to this Assembly since their installation in 2020. Their 2020 budget read, "Our plan for prosperity, protecting our people in a COVID-19 environment, strengthening democracy and the rule of law, incentivizing growth and job creation, enhancing welfare." Mr. Speaker, when the 2021 budget came knocking on Parliament's door, a number of things were made clear from the 2020 budget. One, the PPP's concern about unemployment did not extend to the over 1,000 persons they dismissed over the last 16 months. The PPP's concern for the welfare of the citizens did not extend to those who now either no longer receive public assistance or are being blackmailed by the staff to give a percentage of what they are receiving or get their names pulled from receiving public assistance in the future. 3, the PPP does not know how to protect our people in a COVID-19 environment. 4, their governance structure is autocratic and everything they are engaged in is turbid, unconstitutional, and antithetical to good governance. 5, the PPP's plan for prosperity was for themselves and cronies. That the US Embassy here in Guyana was forced to speak to the issue of rule of law in relation to how the PPP has operated since returning to office, stating that, and I quote, "You need to be serious about the economic manifestation of the rule of law, must be seen as an indication of how far the PPP is from what can be considered transparent, accountable, equitable, and ensuring due process." Mr. Speaker, then we moved on to the 2021 budget, which promised a path to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. By the end of 2021, everyone asked, what did the PPP recover us from? From all appearances, we are in a worse state than we were in 2020. And by the end of their term in office, we will still be in recovery mode. Mr. Speaker, people questioned whether those on the other side understood the meaning of dynamism. Economic dynamism is a concept that must be understood first in its wider context. The term economic dynamism refers to the rate and direction of change in an economy. It traditionally encompasses activities like the rate of new businesses formation, the frequency of labor market turnover, and the geographic mobility of the workforce. It basically allows for a process termed creative destruction, where businesses enter the marketplace and expand, or they leave the marketplace, contract and leave the marketplace. Now, if this is done strictly based on the supply and demand of the consumer, then it will be difficult to fight. The reality is, however, governments are usually the largest consumer of goods and services in any economy. Small, medium, and large companies rely on contracts from the government to remain viable. Mr. Speaker, in our context, when a government has been as authoritarian as the PPP and thrives on driving fear into Guyanese, the government becomes a so-called invisible hand in our economy, determining the levels of dynamism we see. What does this mean? Many companies entering and leaving the market here in Guyana do so on the sole premise of whether they can gain contracts from the government. In the end, the economy has been dynamic, negatively affecting any one group or company that may be deemed not a friend of the PPP, and positively affecting those that are friends and families of the PPP. Mr. Speaker, now they have saddled us with this latest budget, titled Steadfast Against All Challenges, Resolute in Building Our One Guyana, with a non-oil budget of $426 billion, $6 billion less than last year when you add the 4 supplementals to the 383 they initially presented in March of 2021. Mr. Speaker, this PPP regime has given away so many tax concessions to their cronies and borrowed so much that our current non-oil budget is $6 billion less than it was last year. Now it becomes clear why they rushed to pass an assent to the Natural Resource Fund Bill of 2021, which the majority of Guyanese believe was illegally passed in the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, to sit and boast about the largest budget ever, when a large section of the population is left to suffer due to your poor attempt at governance, not your, Mr. Speaker, but the PPP, your incompetence, your mediocre attempt at policy formation, and your inability to create and sell to the Guyanese people a vision that we can all agree to and work towards is ludicrous. Mr. Speaker, while they come here and boast about the largest budget, the Guyanese people have to endure inflation, high costs of living, high youth unemployment, extrajudicial killings, blackouts, load shedding, blackouts, load shedding, plenty more blackouts, and lots of load shedding. Then, Mr. Speaker, there is no water, low water, or if you are lucky to get water, it's gray water, brown water, or reddish water like the new $2,000 bill. Mr. Speaker, those are the challenges, and frankly speaking, they're all man-made challenges, created by a group of people who are not allowed to think for themselves, but follow the instruction of one man, whose scope is limited to corruption, nepotism, racism, bullyism, and narcissism. This cabal has no idea what they're doing. They lack the intellectual capacity and foresight to effectively prepare the economy for the monies available to us through the Natural Resource Fund. Mr. Speaker, as far as the members on this side of the House are concerned, the NRF 2020 of 2021 was not legally passed. But what is even more worrying is that the PPP who rushed that bill through are content not to abide by sections of it. Section 16.2 states quite clearly that all withdrawals from the fund shall be deposited into the consolidated fund and shall be used only to finance national development priorities, including any initiative aimed at realizing an inclusive green economy, and essential projects that are directly related to ameliorating the effects of a major natural disaster. Mr. Speaker, this section expects any government to clearly identify the national development priorities that require the resources of the fund. Instead, what we are seeing in this budget is a line item under Table 2A and 2B and Table 4, which show that the full $126 billion will be withdrawn from the fund. This is unacceptable and must be corrected. Nowhere in the NRF Act that we believe is illegal is there any word like consultation, not one word that suggests that the Guyanese people should be consulted on anything to do with how the fund will operate and the monies allocated. This to me should be seen as a major red flag. why would you negate any form of consultative process with the stakeholders? Mr. Speaker, just a few days ago, I had a dream. And in this dream, Mr. Speaker, there were 65 members sitting in the National Assembly. There was a handsome gentleman sitting in the chair of the Speaker. In this dream, Mr. Speaker, the members on the government side brought a bill before the Assembly, a bill resembling all things corrupt and lacking transparency and accountability. The members of the opposition side, at the behest of their constituents and other right-minded groups and citizens, sought to have the bill sent to a select committee to facilitate consultation with a wide range of stakeholders. One thing led to the other, and the Assembly was out of control. Mr. Speaker, you see, my little understanding of how a Speaker operates suggests to me that whenever the Speaker recognizes that he is not in control of the House, he should adjourn the sitting and seek to speak to both the government and opposition to determine an amicable way forward. But this Speaker in my dream was adamant to carry on with the business of his paymasters. So amidst the noise and confusion, I saw this Speaker holding on to dear life to a replica mace and presiding over the Assembly where all members were in defiance of his authority. But Mr. Speaker, he didn't care as long as his paymasters got what they wanted and they were happy. His actions, Mr. Speaker, gave a lot of credence to the view that he does not attempt to pretend to be unbiased. But then again, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member?
Yes, sir.
I think you had a premonition and not a dream.
It was.
So you move on from that and come back to the
Mr. Speaker, I'm almost finished with
or
my
else, right? You had a premonition.
No, Mr. Speaker, it was a dream.
And it played out. It played out. So
I can't
continue, please.
Thank you.
Not on this line, though.
But then again, Mr. Speaker, in my dream, it was mentioned that he was on the government list of candidates for the elections. And that particular government does not allow for any among their rank to even pretend to be independent. So I guess the opposition members should not expect much from that Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in that dream, it became very evident that in that august House, they reached the nadir of all things transparent and accountable. For those of us who may or may not know, nadir means the lowest point, a time of great depression. So, Mr. Speaker, it is probably fitting in the most facetious way that
I can give you some other definitions of nadir also. If you are an ardent space fan, when you have the zenith, the star way above you, the opposite side is nadir. But in Arabic, I point you to check that out. Right? Very esteemed person.
Okay, sir.
And
this was a dream.
And I am a Muslim, and my name derives from Arabic.
So, Mrs.
And I want to again urge you move on from your dreams. Okay.
So, Mr. Speaker, it is probably fitting in the most facetious way that we find ourselves here today with an installed regime, a travesty of a 22 budget, and 16 months of a National Assembly being presided over by Speaker of the House, the Honorable Manzoor Nadir. Mr. Speaker, as the person responsible for shadowing the Public Service Minister, I must say that I am utterly dumbfounded and at a loss of words to describe how farcical it is of this administration to bring its third budget to this House with little to no focus on developing or improving the public sector. Reading the entire budget speech, Mr. Speaker, there was one mention of public service, and that only one mention was of what you did last year, which was already unacceptable. Mr. Speaker, I am standing here wondering if the minister, well, if the Public Service Ministry is a shell ministry, or is it that the administration has no faith in the Honorable Minister? Mr. Speaker, the Education Ministry has seemingly hijacked the Gold Project, which was the only noticeable work of the Public Service Ministry was involved in. At this juncture, I am perplexed as to what the Honorable Minister and her ministry has been doing, or according to this budget, is planning to do for 2022. I await her presentation so that she can not only inform me, but this nation of what exactly she has been doing as the Minister of the Public Service over the last 16 months and what she intends to do besides the gold program. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member, Mr. Speaker, as you're on the gold project, which is most likely what the Minister will spend most of her time speaking about, outside of probably what happened during the recount and my scholarship and who I did or did not give scholarships to, there are a number of things I believe should be highlighted. While the issuing of scholarships are an important part of the responsibilities of the Minister of the Public Service, it is placed under the care of this particular ministry because it is expected that these scholars, once they have completed their programs, would enter the public service utilizing their new skills and knowledge to further professionalize said public service. Mr. Speaker, this is not so for the gold recipients, as gold recipients are not bound to work in the public service. Thus, even public servants who are gold scholarship recipients can choose after completing their program to leave the public service. Why then is the Minister of Public Service spending so much of her time marketing a program that is likely to have very little impact on the public service? Mr. Speaker, another question that must be answered is, will there be any database in place to ensure that scholarship recipients have first access to vacancies, whether in the public or private sector, or will our scholarship recipients be left to figure it all out on their own? There are already major complaints about the gold scholarships, as no assistance is given to recipients of these scholarships who do not have consistent and constant access to the internet. For those of us who are not aware, the majority, if not all, of the scholarships are to institutions overseas who are not aware of and are not interested in our deficiencies here, where blackouts and the internet are concerned. The onus thus lies in the Ministry of Public Service and the Ministry of Education to ensure that recipients are able to successfully complete their programs. This alone brings us to another point. What really is the success rate of those who receive scholarships? It is all good to boast about 5,000 or 6,000 persons that received gold scholarships, but can the Minister indicate to this House what the success rate is for persons who took part in the short courses over the last year? Mr. Speaker, there is no serious human resource plan and program for our country that would ensure that our unemployment numbers reduce significantly. As I am sure I have said before, scholarships are good, but if not properly planned and targeted, we will continue to have persons with a myriad of certificates who cannot find proper employment, and that should not be our aim at this juncture of our development. Mr. Speaker, the 2016 Commission of Inquiry into the Public Service generated a comprehensive list of recommendations for the reform of the public sector that will require time to fully implement. It is urgent that the Minister of the Public Service initiate actions to promote and enforce a depoliticized, meritocratic, efficient, and citizen-oriented service through public service regulations and codes of conduct, performance management, and rationalized, fair, and consistent pay structures associated with written job descriptions. I do hope that the Minister of the Public Service has plans in place to properly develop all aspects of the public service. This grand, lofty budget that the PPP believes is best for Guyana requires capable and efficient public servants who have the requisite resources to properly implement the programs that the government wants implemented. It is inhumane for this administration to expect that the public servants must continuously work and implement the policies of this administration with a sense of ownership and alacrity if they do not feel that they are also benefiting from it. Mr. Speaker, much has been said about the fact that there is not much in the budget for public servants. Inflation has not only swallowed up whatever tax threshold increase is being touted, but the 7% increase and the bonuses that persons received last year has also been swallowed up. The public servant who is earning minimum wage received a monthly salary increase of a mere $4,900, while the president, who is earning $2 million plus, will be receiving a $150,000 increase. Worse still is this, that the minimum wage earners must pay taxes on their salary increase, which they did, while the president will not. This stark contradiction highlights the major difference between the APNU+AFC coalition and the PPP. The coalition government consistently ensured that senior public servants were awarded a lower percentage increase than junior public servants, thereby ensuring that the income gap would reduce over time. The PPP's single rate across the board increase is intended to widen the gap between those who have much and those who have little. In a time when world over, emphasis is being placed on equity, the president chose to reward himself and minister with a 7% increase amounted to 150,000 tax-free for himself, 120,000 tax-free for the AG and Prime Minister, and 60,000 for other ministers, knowing very well that the public servants who work for minimum wage will be taking home an increase of 3,528 Guyana dollars after tax. $3,528 after tax, Honorable Sonia Paral. That cannot even buy a bottle of cooking gas, Honorable Member Sonia Paral. In comparison, consider the following. After just 18 months in office from July 1st, 2015 to January 1st, 2017, the APNU+AFC increased the minimum wage by over 50%, increased the income tax threshold by 20%, reduced the marginal income tax rate to 28%, and removed the tax from employees' contribution to the NIS. In addition, old age pension increased by 45% and public assistance by 27%. All of this without utilizing $1 in oil revenues. Mr. Speaker, the age-old problem of persons entering the public service being told that they have to wait 3 to 6 months before receiving their first paycheck has to come to an end. Even though it may not seem to be important enough for the National Assembly to accept the motion for whatever reason, Mr. Speaker, other public servants too, who are scholarship recipients, have complained about being forced to sign documents relieving the government from its contractual obligations to students who were on scholarship and expected to serve their country as a public servant. This too must stop. Mr. Speaker, this then brings me to another important point. The Ministry of the Public Service portfolio includes the management of the human resources in our public service. All indications from August 2020 to now suggest that the professionals in many of our public sector offices are leaving the job or are being asked to leave. Persons willing to do the biddings of those in charge are being promoted. Public servants are anxious and unsure of what will happen next. The gains made in the public service between 2015 to 2020 have now regressed significantly across our public service, and the Minister of the Public Service has remained silent. One major public service department that I believe requires highlighting due to their current inability to adequately do the work that is required is the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA, Mr. Speaker, was created in 1996 by the PPC. The state of the agency inherited by the coalition can be described as follows. And this is description by the staff then. The staff of the agency described the EPA as low morale, dysfunctional, a toothless tiger, disrespected by all, place to dwell until he can do better, and humiliating with politicians overruling decisions. There was extremely high turnover of staff. There was only one EPA office in Georgetown to serve the entire country. There was grave human capacity deficit to execute the legislative mandate of the agency. A 2015 forensic audit determined that 262 staff were needed, but the agency was trying to accomplish its task with a staff of only 95. And this number did not include the need for staff focusing on oil and gas. There were no engineers and very few scientists in the agency. A system of record keeping, control, and secure custody of critically important legal documents, such as permits, contracts, and files, were non-existent. Mr. Speaker, the coalition found the existence of 2,100 permits with over 500 expired permits, some over 15 years expiration, plus a large number of unexpired permits that were issued in error, and facilities constructed and operating without permits. Near zero opportunity for training, exposure to international technical conferences, and membership in internationally recognized professional associations. The Environmental Protection Agency did not have its own certified laboratory. It had limited up-to-date measurement equipment and modeling tools to measure and analyze contaminants in the environment. There were only two roadworthy vehicles, which were far from adequate to conduct field inspections necessary for compliance monitoring for the entire country. There were no penalties or fines ever enforced despite hundreds of violations. The EPA transferred its environmental oversight of mining to the GGMC, which was a clear conflict of interest with the GGMC overseeing its own operations and EPA dishing its legislative mandate. Permit applications took years to process. Except for the Higgs-Bosch landfill, which is in itself questionable as to its engineering integrity, all other garbage and waste disposed of in uncontrolled dump sites seriously affected surface and groundwater, air quality, fire hazards, and breeding rodents, mosquitoes, and diseases. Mr. Speaker, this is what the coalition found. This is the PPP's record on the environment. This is how the PPP treated the entire public service, with scant regard. No matter what they attempt to say, as the Honorable Minister said yesterday, the facts speak for themselves. However, Mr. Speaker, the APNU+AFC came to government 19 years after the establishment of the EPA, and under the guidance of Dr. Vince Adams, there were significant transformational changes at the EPA, which included the following. 1, 2 additional offices were opened at Wim and Linden with plans in place for an office in all regions by 2021. 2, the MOU with the GGMC was cancelled, thus returning mandated regulatory oversight of mining to the EPA, and which terminated the disturbing conflict of interest situation with the GGMC overseeing its own mining operations. 3, the APNU+AFC began aggressive capacity building and career development of employees to cope with exponential increase in workload with quadrupling of the economy in 4 years. 4, paid study leave, summer internship programs, international networking, such as exposing staff to international conferences, meetings, and memberships in professional organizations. The number of training, conferences, and staff participants were doubled in 1 year from 88 to 161 and 160 to 223, respectively. We recruited 20 highly qualified staff and attorneys, including first five engineers. We partnered with the World Bank to design an EPA oil and gas unit consisting of 34 highly skilled staff to oversee the petroleum industry, including 24/7 on-site presence. We revised the EPA Act, environmental legislations, standards and guides as high priority to make current the rapid changes driven by the oil and gas production that was not considered in the 25-year-old Act. We hired an attorney dedicated to that task. We made Guyana the 10th member of the International Offshore Petroleum Environmental Regulators, including membership on the Oil Spill Working Group. We elevated Guyana to the forefront of international leaders in the groundbreaking environmental technology of environmental DNA. As testimony to EPA's impressive show of leadership, Guyana was chosen to host the 2021 International Workshop on this subject, but was hampered by COVID. We established a Coastal Marine Management Committee in 2018 to coordinate the management of our coastal and marine resources. The first document control center with modern filing room and state-of-art electronic database and file management system constituted over 2,100 project files, thus alleviating a chaotic and unstructured system for records management and secure custody of important documents, including legal documents such as permits and contracts, was built.
Before you continue to tell us how much you did, you need an extension, Honorable Member.
Comrade Speaker, I move for the Honorable Member to be given 5 minutes to conclude her presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Member. You may continue to conclude in 5 minutes.
We brought all 500 expired permits and most other violations into compliance and worked with others to establish compliance schedules as necessary. We recovered 140 million in otherwise lost revenues by bringing violators into compliance, while at the same time quadrupled annual revenues from 50 million in 2015 to 200 million in 2019. Without any additional funding from the Treasury, Dr. Vince Adams and staff used self-generated, recovered, and newly increased revenues to increase the vehicle fleet from 2 to 10, thus substantially boosting field monitoring to maintain compliance, which was severely lacking and responsible for the numerous expired permits, and to recruit 20 highly skilled scientists and engineers that were almost non-existent. For the first time, we developed a board-approved plan for full self-funding of EPA by 2023. For the first time, the EPA took necessary actions in accordance with the rule of law to impose fines for very serious violations of the laws and threats to the environment, safety, and health of the nation, including proceeding with prosecution of Exxon for refusing to pay a paltry fine for one such persistent violation. We initiated plans for EPA's own certified laboratory to conduct more complex analysis over and above preliminary data from field equipment. Labs will soon pay for itself. We took on the much avoided daunting challenge of finally solving the decades-old waste disposal problem, including nationwide garbage dumping in environmentally sensitive areas. This is what took place not only in the EPA, but other public agencies who finally had the space to breathe, to become professional, and to do their work without political overreach. This is what the APNU+AFC government did during its tenure, and of this we can be proud. But Mr. Speaker, the PPP is back. Mr. Speaker, the PPP is back. And what has happened in the EPA since August 2020 is nothing short of a travesty. Mr. Speaker, the current PPC government in just one short year alone has embarked on a massive tearing down of the institutional pillars that were built by the coalition for sound environmental protection. Such cruel destruction of the extraordinary transformation achieved by the coalition in its short 4 years may only be explained as political expediency without care for the nation's environmental safety and well-being. These unconscionable actions include returning the same leadership personnel that ran the EPA into the ground, destroying morale of and having chilling effect on high-performing staff by executing discriminatory terminations, demotions, and negation of contracts, despite agencies' limited capacity, returning the agency to a state of mistrust and disrespect from the public and business community and politicizing the agency, wholesale interference from politicians who routinely pressure EPA staff to issue permits to friends and acquaintances and overturn major decisions made by EPA technical personnel. For example, Mr. Speaker, the EPA published that the Demerara River Bridge required an EIA, only to be forced to reverse that decision. It now seems to be the order of the day not to have EIAs for projects which the EPA would normally be deemed to have an EIA. The PPP dropped the court case against Exxon and retaliated against the attorney prosecuting the case, even though he happens to be an employee of the highest caliber performance. The PPP...
Time to conclude, time to conclude.
So, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, when my colleagues on this side of the House speak to the fact that the PPP is not truly interested in real development, this is what we mean. When my colleagues and I are skeptical about whether we can trust PPP to effectively and efficiently deal with power and authority, what we just heard from the EPA informs us. We on this side of the House understand that the PPP has no interest in the poor. no interest in the working class, no interest in true development, and no interest in the environment. The budget shows us all who care to see that their interest is in extending even further than they have already done their hands and our collective money to their cronies. And so, Mr. Speaker, I, Tabitha Sarah Bahali, will not and cannot support this travesty of a budget. I thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. Thank you for the dream, and thank you for the presentation.
Well, a very good morning to you and welcome to day 3 of the debates here in the National Assembly. You just finished looking back at the Honorable MP, giving us a breakdown in terms of the Public Service Department. As you know, the response from the Minister of Public Service didn't really make any sense to us because she failed to answer a number of questions. She even hinted at having a salary increase. You imagine that? A salary increase in 2022. Hinted, didn't really say that there's going to be one. She hinted at having a salary increase. And you would know they made the same mistake last time, that's 2021, that they're going to have a salary increase. And what you got in 2022, a meager 7%. 7%. Could you imagine that? 7%. So stay tuned. We're going to be bringing to you live. We're going to send you back into the main dome down there in the Parliament to give you the live budget debate. Our MP is going to be starting off this morning. Proceedings is MP Vince Roy Jordan. He's going to be starting off our proceedings, our debate this morning. Then it's going to be followed, but you need to stay tuned for the next speaker, who's going to come after MP Jordan, and that is MP Jarita Finance. She is the person responsible for finance, shadowing finance, and I can tell you, she's going to go nuclear this morning. So you need to stay tuned for that. And also, we're going to be having, let me bring it up for you so you can see the number of MPs we have. We want to ensure that you, our viewers, get all the information you need. We want to show you how this government prepared a budget not really for you and I, but for their cronies and their friends and their families and their business colleagues in the private sector. So you're going to see how we're going to break it down for you so you're going to understand that this budget has nothing in store for you and I. You have listened to our MPs, you have seen how they have exposed this budget, and very soon you're going to hear more from our MPs, how they're going to break it down piece by piece so that you, the citizen out there, could get what is needed. Get the bits and pieces, get what they're not really telling you about the budget. So stay tuned for that. We're bringing you that coverage. We're going to send you right now into the Parliament for day 3 and we're going to ensure that you don't miss a thing right here on your favorite channel, that is the opposition channel, and that is the APNU+AFC opposition channel. Stay tuned.
Not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo. Take time on it, though we may criticize it. This is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right, so we ain't giving up no mountain. We ain't giving up no tea. We ain't giving up no river. That belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one cries, not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river. That belongs to we.
do most humbly beseech thee to guide us in all our consultations, so that we may together build a land where knowledge is free, where the mind is without fear, and the head is held high, and where words come from the depth of truth. Grant us, O God, thy need and guidance, so that we may deal justly with the several causes that come before us, laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and personal preferences, so that the result of our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion, the preservation of justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the President, and the peace and prosperity of Guyana. Grant us, O God, the vision so to lead, that all the people of this fair land may enter in that state of brotherhood and unity, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action.
Honorable members, please be seated.
Messages from the President. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, we begin today's sitting of the National Assembly, the third day of Budget Debate 2022. The last 2 days were very encouraging. We have been taking down dreams and Nancy stories and the culinary delights of Guyana, including cocoa price, palauri, plantains, nuts, and cassava. Let us continue in this vein. I just want to remind members that some amount of heckling is necessary, but the shouting across the room tends to be very distracting and behavior that is not associated with august assemblies like this. Let us continue in this vein and continue to complete the work of the people of our country. Mr. Clerk.
Presentation of petitions. Presentation of papers and reports, etc. Reports from committees. Oral questions without notice. Questions on notice. Statement by ministers including policy statements. Personal explanations. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the National Assembly and moved by a minister. Introduction of bills. Public business. Government's business.
Honorable members, we will now resume the debate on the budget speech for 2022. The first speaker today is the Honorable Member, Mr. Vince Roy Jordan. Honorable Member, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in relation to the budget presented by the Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance on January 26, 2020, under the theme, Steadfast Against All Challenges, Resolute in Building Our One Guyana. Mr. Speaker, my careful examination of this budget proves that the Honorable Minister was right when he chose the theme. Mr. Speaker, yes, he was correct, because to my understanding, he said to all Guyanese that all the PPPC government remains steadfast against challenges by ordinary man and the opposition to convince them that a poor, pro-poor, people-centered budget is what is needed and not a rich man's friends, family, and associates of the PPPC budget. Mr. Speaker, further I say that the Honorable Minister was again correct when he said, resolute in building our one Guyana. Because clearly, sir, the PPPC's one Guyana is evidently defined as special preference to one ethnic group, one class and caliber of people, one set of affiliates and associates, and yes, one way of governance through corruption, inequalities, and injustices. Mr. Speaker, this budget will indeed build one class and one group of people, while, sir, the ordinary citizens and hard-working public servants are left out in the cold, fighting for survival in an already challenging and difficult society. Sir, I deem this budget a long, empty talk, one which has been a funded waste by taxpayers' dollars to hold Parliament and the budget sitting to have the Honorable Minister come before this August House and Guyanese to indicate such harsh measures in the form of a national budget. Mr. Speaker, in an already challenged and adverse Guyanese society, one would have expected that a budgetary plan coming to this House, it would bring great relief for all citizens, workers and their families amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. But sir, this budget failed to do just that. Instead, Mr. Speaker, it has caused Guyanese now to be in a much depressed and worrisome state, now knowing that they have to put up very soon with 3 major pandemics instead of 2 in one country. Firstly, the COVID-19 pandemic, secondly, the PPP government, and thirdly, the soon-to-be-passed 2022 budgetary allocations. To this end, sir, permit me to tell you about the wanton woes and failures of the PPC's government 2022 budget. Public health in Region 5, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this budgetary allocation will fail the people of Region 5, Mahaica-Borbis region, significantly with some $219 million allocated to this region for healthcare in an oil-producing economy, a mere $24 million more than last year's allocation. Sir, all that this allocation will do for the people of Region 5 is purchase 1 ambulance. Yes, sir, 1 ambulance, 1 bus. It will also cater for a storage barn and oxygen supplies for 2 health centers and the Maikoni Hospital, along with the construction of a living quarters. Mr. Speaker, this is a demonstration of the gross incompetence by this administration and the lack of vision for the region. Not forgetting, Mr. Speaker, it is the true uncaring nature of the PPPC government. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what the people of Region 5 needs. We need new ambulances, 1 to be added to the existing ones at both Fort Wellington and Maikoni hospitals. In addition, 3 new ambulances which should be placed at health centers across the region at our far-flung and densely populated areas such as Rosignol, Bushlot, and Haidam, respectively, in cases of emergencies. Mr. Speaker, we need a new state-of-the-art modern regional hospital to house all the necessary departments and sectors of public health care services, such as a functioning surgical theater, physiotherapy and radiology center, maternity and pediatric wards, and dialysis centers. Sir, we need a fully equipped and functioning laboratory at both our hospitals. Sir, we need hospitals that are properly staffed and catering for all levels of those staff and ensuring that they would have at least the basic PPEs and medical operating equipment. Mr. Speaker, our Amerindian brothers and sisters of Maracaibo needs a river ambulance to get them from 96 miles up the Maikoni River in cases of emergencies. Mr. Speaker, river ambulance. Mr. Speaker, we need sufficient supply of drugs so that we can move from often being referred to a private pharmacy for purchases, especially when our senior citizens got only a mere $3,000 on their old age pension, and with cost of living significantly skyrocketing on a daily basis, and public servants only receiving a slim 7% in salary for almost 3 years. Mr. Speaker, how can we survive? Sir, just how can the ordinary Guyanese survive under these difficult conditions? Mr. Speaker, when the regional administration and the PPPC government can get all that right with a well-paid and happy public sector staff corps, then they can come back to this house and call it Budget 2022. But for now, sir, this budget is a long, empty talk. Mr. Speaker, permit me to touch on education in the Mahaica-Borbis region. Again, in this oil-producing economy, and education being one of our main pillars of development in society, sir, this sector received a meager $20 million or 14.7% increase from last year's $136 million, taking it to $156 million. Sir, the PPPC government continues to deny a good life for all Guyanese, our teachers and children in the Mahaica-Borbis region. Sir, I would continue to stress the cry for the people for an urgent need of a new and separate building to house the number 8 nursery school, which is presently being housed at the lower flat in an already crowded number 8 primary school building. Not an extension of a building, Mr. Speaker. Sir, permit me to say to the Honorable Minister of Education that we are still in a COVID-19 pandemic, and all our schools should now be developing new safe spaces and be adequately outfitted with quality furniture, not like the inferior table and chair combinations that were sole source and purchased by the regional administration last year for our precious teachers to sit on. And the Honorable Jafar Ali can testify to that. Mr. Speaker, from this budgetary allocation, all we can see is rehabilitative and maintenance upgrade works being done to existing structures. Nothing new, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, where is the Ministry of Education plan to advance more new schools and smart classrooms in Region 5? Sir, where is the study and plan to have a Cyril Potter College of Education for our hundreds of teachers who have to travel to Region 6 East Berbice Quarantine and Georgetown Region 4 to access training? Mr. Speaker, in essence, what am I advising here today is what a Mahaica-Borbis regional budget should look like, especially in an already $607 million rich economy. Mr. Speaker, this 2022 budget is like the flood relief and the COVID-19 cash grant. Highly politicized, ethnicized, unfair, corrupt, and benefits only the friends and elites of the PPPC to get rich and for some more rich. Mr. Speaker, permit me to touch on public infrastructure. Sir, deplorable roads and broken drainage systems should be a thing of the past for all in a well-claimed oil-rich economy like Guyana. However, sir, the PPPC remains resolute in building Day One Guyana. As of such, only one set of communities can have new upgraded roads like the Honorable Jafar Ali, his road, canals and bridges. Mr. Speaker, let me list from the long empty talk a number of communities that will benefit from roads and streets in the regional allocation. Sir, for example, completion of road at district number 10, the Hoop Mahaica. And Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Jafar Ali can tell you who lives there and who will benefit. The regional chairman. The regional chairman. upgrade and rehabilitation of works to roads at Waterloo, Bushlot, Bath Settlement, and number 10 West Coast Babi, sir. Mr. Speaker, let us face the facts. These are extracts from Volume 3, Reference Code 346, Program 753, Public Works, under the executing agency, Regional Democratic Council, Region 5. With no other villages being mentioned, sir, it begs the question, what happened, the Honorable Jafar Ali, to villages like Belladrum, Hopetown, Lovely Lass, Calcutta, Trafalgar, and number 5, just to name a few. So what you said the other day in this House, Honorable Member, and you spoke about love and care, is far from the truth. So this confirms that the Honorable Minister was right. The PPPC is on a mission of building their one Guyana. When they set out to spend an entire budgetary allocation, over $131 million, sir, in predominantly only PPPC supported base and Indo-Guyanese community. Mr. Speaker, how dare the PPPC want to say to Guyanese that this budget is for all and benefits all? Mr. Speaker, apart from the heavily ethnicized and politicized nature of this allocation of the nation's resources, the PPPC administration is seeking to starve all communities that does not support them from positive growth and development, like Region 4 and Region 10, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me help the Honorable Minister with a fair work plan for Region 5 Public Works. The number 29 primary school needs urgent repairs. But sir, I guess the Honorable Jafar Ali knows whose children goes there. The Barmer Branch Road is in a deplorable state, sir. Several streets in Ithaca and Trafalgar Line are impassable and needs to be repaired, Mr. Speaker. People live there too. The number 8 primary school street is like the Lethem Trail. Cross streets in on the Neiman and Hopetown are far beyond repairs, Honorable Jafar Ali. You can fix them and then come back and talk about love and one Guyana. Mr. Speaker, I dare the Honorable Minister to add those to his work plan and then return to this House and call it a national budget. Mr. Speaker, permit me to touch on agriculture. Mr. Speaker, the sugar industry has been pronounced dead by the PPPC administration when they failed to resurrect and reopen the number of estates as they promised to do once they returned to office. Mr. Speaker, this is not only a failed promise, but an unrealistic venture, especially, sir, when they keep plunging billions of dollars every year to prop up the image and survivability of Gaisuku at the expense of thousands of poor Guyanese and hard-working public servants who continues to suffer. Sir, let me let the Guyanese people know about the performance of this unprofitable, poorly managed.
Honorable Member, let me know you need an extension to tell us about that.
Mr. Speaker, I do move that the honorable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Honorable Member, you can tell us about that in the next 5 minutes as you conclude.
Thank you, sir. Sir, in 2022, the APNU+AFC coalition left a 5-year 2020 to 2025 business plan for Gaisuku. Sir, that plan had estimated to continue on the path of production of 147,000 metric tons of sugar annually. However, Mr. Speaker, with the PPPC managing the sugar industry, we saw production significantly reducing from 92,246 metric tons in 2019 to just over 80,000 metric tons in 2020. A revised 97,420 metric tons in 2021 to 70 metric tons to an unsatisfactory 57,995 metric tons. then to a further reduction, Mr. Speaker, of the planned production target of 66,000 metric tons for 2022. Mr. Speaker, all this represents a 34.7% decline in the performance of the sugar industry. Mr. Speaker, this government spent almost $30 billion on Gaisuco from 2020 to now and still failed to reopen one estate. Yes, Honorable Zulfikar Mustafa, one estate. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister in his budget presentation said on page 29, paragraph 4.39, to this end, I quote, these products will increase from 34% in 2020 to 64% of total production in 2022. How laughable, sir. Mr. Speaker, if we can't produce the sugar, how will we be able to produce the new bagged and packaged sugar products at an increased 64% in 2022? Mr. Speaker, I dare say to the Honorable Minister with responsibility for finance that he is living in Disneyland and planning a fairy tale for Gaisuco in Wonderland. Mr. Speaker, the sufferings continue for rice farmers. Sir, I visited a number of farmlands and had a first-hand look at the farmers, at what the farmers are going through to make a daily living. Mr. Speaker, rice production declined by 16.1% over the last year, while the price for fertilizer tripled on the market, sir. Mr. Speaker, the plight across the rice industry ranges from deplorable farm to market access road, clogged irrigational canals, and the unfair, irresponsible manner of which flood relief cash grants was distributed, with only the rich and the associates of the PPP receiving those relief. Sir, in Bushrat village, a large-scale cattle and rice farmer who is a well-known supporter of the APNU+AFC was denied fair compensation for his losses. Let me tell you, sir, this farmer has, with evidence to show, hundreds of acres of rice land that he cultivates and over 150 head of cattle, sir, but he was given a check in his name of only $100,000, while persons who have never planted not even grass, Mr. Speaker, receive checks worth of $2 to $5 million in that community. Mr. Speaker, then those on the other side doesn't want us to come here and talk about corruption. Well, sir, if it's not corruption, then what is it? In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, this long, empty talk of a budget will put significant pressure on the lives of ordinary Guyanese. Sir, it will take only the hand of God to perform a divine act to rescue this nation out of the hands of the modern day pharaohs of Egypt called the PPP government. Nonetheless, sir, I can assure Guyanese that God is watching and he will act very soon, like the words of Moses to the Israelites in the book of Exodus 14:13. Do not be afraid, Mr. Speaker. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see them no more forever. According to the New King James Version, the PPP shall be no more. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2022 is crude, cruel, and wicked. It is like a runaway train heading this country into a serious wreckage. It will do the ordinary Guyanese no good. And finally, Mr. Speaker, Guyanese today are emotionally distressed at hearing this budget and will soon file a report with the Criminal Investigation Department. I thank you.
And thank you, Honorable Member, for that very colorful presentation. Our next contributor is the Honorable Member, Mr. Darren